I'm Arthur Brownell. I'm the former Commissioner of Natural Resources a few years ago. I was born and raised in Massachusetts. At an early age, fished for striped bass in the Cape Cod Canal and throughout the Cape. Left Massachusetts for college and came back in 1959 and went to work for the Department of Natural Resources. And 7 years later became the Commissioner. Remember that time as far as the late 60s and 70s was really the advent of the environmental movement and the concern throughout our nation, and it was a wonderful time to be in government and be responsible for the natural resources of Massachusetts, particularly its marine resources. And you have to remember at that time the big concern was not striped bass. There are plenty of striped bass throughout the waters. It was the Soviet Union's vessels off of our coast, the East Germans, the Portuguese, and many other nations. And the Marine Fisheries Division at that time was in advocacy for the protection of the fish of Massachusetts and our ocean. And people forget that the whole genesis of the idea of extending our boundaries from 3 to 200 miles happened right here in Massachusetts. And the division basically was responsible for getting a lot of that work done with a march on Washington, boats going, lobbying activity, resulted with the passage of the Magnuson-Stevenson Act in 1974. But we also then took over the management of those fish as far as this nation is concerned. And, I left Massachusetts as far as the commissioner's job and went into private industry in 1975. And since that time, I've had the opportunity to fish, on the total range of the striped bass in the Atlantic Ocean. And since being retired, my really avocation has been to make striped bass a game fish in that total region. There's no question that the population of striped bass today is not what it was 5 years ago. There's been talk that in Chesapeake Bay, 75% of all striped bass have a disease and possibly could die. Yes, we had plenty of striped bass when I was commissioner. It was not an issue. We had the whole 1980s when you couldn't catch any striped bass because it was closed because of the decline of the population. And people question today whether that's happening. The recreational and commercial harvest of striped bass is down considerably. People don't realize that the number of striped bass is of a decline since its peak in the 90s, and that the number of fish caught by recreational fishermen has declined dramatically in the last 3 years. We also have a large commercial fisheries, not just in Massachusetts, but in many of the other states. There's not enough striped bass to supply the recreational usage and the commercial consumption of striped bass. Striped bass are protected in federal waters. You cannot keep a striped bass if you catch it beyond the 3-mile limit. Some states, 4, have adopted striped bass as a game fish. Massachusetts hasn't. And I think that is a problem in a situation that really legislatures and others have to look at, because the recreational value is just outstanding. I mean, striped bass fishing in Massachusetts is a big economic value that people just don't realize. You can catch striped bass from the islands to the Merrimack. And 30% of all the striped bass that are harvested by recreational fishermen happens right here in Massachusetts. Striped bass spends 7 months of its year, of its life, in a year's time, right off of our coast. So, it's an economic plus a recreational value that's just totally underutilized. Striped bass can be raised artificially, just like tilapia and salmon can, so that there's no reason why we can't make striped bass a game fish and keep it for the recreational fishermen. And that's something that really is going to be undertaken and looked at and presented to the people and the legislature. Do you want really to protect this resources? You can protect it by making striped bass a game fish. I know if I was commissioner and this situation was the same with striped bass then as it is today, I'd be the biggest advocate for striped bass becoming a game fish. I hope you agree with that and support that position.